Hello, welcome to the Two Fat Brokers podcast or videocast, depending what format you're looking at it on. I'm Ben from Abu Dhabi.
Barney from Dubai.
We own Crompton Partners Real Estate, and today we are talking
Crompton
about...
Partners estate agents.
Crompton Partners Sales. Yeah.
Rewind.
Cut that bit. Today we're going to be talking about off-plan. Various aspects of it. What's it doing now? Should you be buying off plan? How's it affecting the market? You know, both in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Manu, you want to start off? What do you think of off plan?
Yeah, well, Dubai is
the
kingpin of the off plan world. I think if you bought off plan 4 years ago, you're probably a little bit upset about where the market is now.
Can I imagine?
I think. If you're buying off plan now, I think you're going to be quite happy with the state of the market when you get your keys. I think.
Why do you say that?
Because
if you're buying now, today.
Yeah, I think in 4 years' time, this market is going to be in a very different place. So if you're buying at today's values, you know, I think in 4 years' time,
4 years when it's delivered,
with a bit of luck and a following wind, you'll have made some nice capital appreciation, and the rental market, if you're buying for investment, should be in a much stronger place. That is why I think buying now is a very good idea.
Some real big incentives at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. It looks to me like developers are taking over from banks. I think if I was a bank, and I did a video on this recently, if I was a bank, I'd be a little bit concerned about where the developers are taking over from you guys. But I also think, you know, with these 7 year, I mean, that's where they are now, 7 year post handover payment plans, I think it's a really nice marketing tool. I think from my perspective, which is a leverage your property as and when you can kind of mindset, I think it's just good marketing. I know that people in this part of the world have a very different mindset where they like to own property outright. I think it also, obviously, they're the kind of people that are going to really like this post-payment plan handover.
So how does it work, the post-payment plan?
So what happens currently, let's use the sweetest deal on the market right now, which is a 30% before handover. So in the 4 years it takes to build, roughly 4 years, it takes to build, you will have paid 30% of the value of that property. Now the 70% will be paid incrementally over the 7 years post-handover.
That sounds like 10% a year.
Hang on, let me get a calculator. Yes, 10% a year. Now, from an investment perspective, once you take over your keys, once you get your keys and you rent it out, you're in the beautiful position where you'll have a tenant helping you make those, how much a year was it?
10%.
Those 10% a year payments, which is really going to bring down your actual amount paid on your house. You are going to need to top that up because obviously they're not going to be paying the full 10% every year. So you will have overheads, but they will be nominal.
Do you think people will take this up or they'll just get bank finance?
My advice to anybody in this circumstance would be to take bank finance the second you get the keys.
Why wouldn't you take the post-handover plan?
Because in my humble opinion, it is not a good business model to have property owned outright in cash.
Okay. It was quite an aggressive payment plan. I mean, finding 10% a year.
Yeah, when you've got a tenant helping you pay it off, it's not a huge amount, you know.
I mean, if you're getting maybe 6-7%.
Yeah, you've got to find 4% a year. But then if you're buying 10 properties, you know, that's not chicken feed to be finding out of your own pocket every year. So my advice is, once you get your keys, you leverage that property, you know, and if you're lucky enough to have gained some capital growth, you can withdraw some of the capital value and then potentially buy another one. That's how you build property empires. That's how you make a property empire from property, rather than a property empire which is where you use it as a banking system, or you know you park your money somewhere. Yeah, I think it's raised some really interesting points that the government need to address, because obviously there is going to be as you say, an 8% increase in our properties handed over this year, which is a huge amount of property handed over in 1 year.
Seems a lot.
We're going to need to grow our population by 8% this year, when they normally grow at probably around between 1.5% to 2%. You know, I think we only ever saw a couple of years where it grew at 8% or more.
People like to use the historical average of, I think between 2009 to 2015, it grew on average 7.5%, but that includes, I think it was 2013 where it went up 15% or something.
Yeah,
absolutely crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to have some pretty impressive incentives for people to come and live here, which it throws up some interesting trials and questions that the government are going to have to answer.
But back to off plan. So do you think people are really motivated by this post handover payment plan? Do you think it's something that they'll take advantage of? Do you think it'll drive off plan sales? And do you think it's a good idea?
I think yes, it will motivate them. Because as I say, this is the part of the world where people like to own property in cash, and given that opportunity to pay over a 7-year period with a tenant, it makes a lot of sense if that's your business model. So yes, I think it is definitely helping drive the market. Do I think it's a good idea? Yes and no. I think it has its, it has
yes
its
and
benefits.
no.
Yes and no. I think it has its benefits and it has its issues. For me, who is a person who likes to leverage property and doesn't like to own property outright, I think it's neither here nor there. But for somebody who wants to own their property outright, yeah, it's nice to have a 7% payment plan. I think, will it affect the market in the long run? Not really. I don't think when you pay for your property is going to have a huge issue. I think you may find further down the line, if we have any sort of global financial issues and people do start to lose their job, you'll probably find there might be a lot of foreclosures. I don't think it's going to have a huge issue on the market. I think the demand is what's going to be the real driver.
It's interesting that the developer's taking the risk on that the banks used to have. So if there was a foreclosure, then the developer would take, the risk. However, it's already got 30%, that's been paid off the property, so it's not much of a risk for them.
Good
but
point.
they've got to borrow the money from the bank as well. So then, it is a cost to them. In Abu Dhabi, we don't have. I think we've got one instance of post handover payment plan.
Do you? Where?
I think so. I think they just announced that Al Jurf was post handover.
Al Jurf.
Yeah. It's between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, an amazing development in Sheikh Zayed's Old Sea Palace. So it's on the water, and it's you can either buy a plot or plot with a villa on, and it's off plan at the moment. It's like a very nice second home.
Private developer or?
Yeah, Imkan is the developer.
Okay.
But for Abu Dhabi, there's not much being launched off plan at the moment because the only people who can launch off plan are developers with a reputation. So we've got a lot of developers with no reputation, or they launched off plan in 2008 and got their fingers burnt. So the only guys launching off plan really at the moment are Aldar. In the past, we've had Bloom, and currently we've got Imkan. Bloom Holdings, they are a pretty big hospitality, education, and property conglomerate.
Are they new to property? Because I've not.
No. They're big. Well, they've just launched 2 schools in Dubai, an American school and a British school. I think back to back. I can't quite. They're
probably called Bloom School, I would imagine.
No, then it's a famous brand of schools. I want to say Duke, but I think that's wrong.
No,
Dwight. They launched the Dwight School. Yeah, and
it's not famous in the UK, Dwight.
No, it's a US school.
Okay,
maybe New York, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So in Abu Dhabi, we don't have a lot of off-plan launches, and actually, people are not. People worry about buying off-plan. It's a risk. In Dubai, you've got a lot more household names: Azizi, Damak, Tiger, Miras, Nakheel, Imar. You've got a lot of those household names that we don't have in Abu Dhabi. We don't have a very deep, pot of experienced sub-developers. So at the moment, the only guys who are actually selling now off plan are Aldar, Bloom, Imkan, Reportage.
So do you think what do you think about these post handover payments? Now they're starting to encroach.
I think for me it's a bit of a gimmick. I think 10% is heavy to pay per year for 7 years. So I think people think it's a good idea, and then they'll get the property handed over to them, and they'll just finance it, which I think is which is what developers are probably.
Do you remember our conversation that we had in the car very briefly the other day? If I was a clever bank, what I would be doing?
If I was,
You never listen to me
bank,
anyway.
no, that's true.
If I was a clever bank, and this harks back to a video which I think will be being posted soon. If I was a clever bank, I would be talking to developers and I would be taking over people's payment plans. So the second a property is handed over, I will say to the owner of the property, I'm going to take over, I'm going to finance this for you. You know, normal financial parameters, you've already paid your deposit to the developer, blah, blah, blah. The bank would then say to the developer, I am going to take your payment plan and I'm going to pay it for you on behalf of the owner. So instead of the bank coming in and paying the full amount to the owner, the bank will incrementally pay that 10% a year to the developer. Meanwhile, the owner has financed his house. And as a bank, you're not required to fork out the full 70% to the developer at any one time, because I can't imagine that a developer is offering a 7-year payment plan without having done their due diligence on it and said, what if these guys actually take us up on it, and actually all of them only pay us all of them pay 70% over 7 years. You know, that must be built into their forecast. So if a bank takes it, or a developer or an individual takes it, makes no odds to them. So a clever bank, and if they really wanted to be super clever, they would also only charge the interest on the amount they lend to the developer. So instead of the owner paying 100% of his mortgage, he would be paying incrementally larger amounts throughout the 7 years that the bank are involved.
I think I probably need a diagram to work out what's going on there. But if you're the buyer, why would you use a bank instead of pay the developer yourself?
Well, like you say, it's a big chunk of change, 10% a year.
So the buyer would take that
He'd take a normal
over
loan.
25 years or whatever.
Yeah, he would take a normal loan over
the bank would
25
take
years.
over the 7-year payment plan.
Correct.
So the bank would only pay it over 7 years. Yeah, would be good business if the developer would allow it, but probably wouldn't.
What do they care if they've done their due diligence on their 7-year payment plan? They're getting their money.
Well,
over
if they
7 years.
allow it, they get it over 7 years. If they don't allow it, then the guy needs finance anyway. Then they get it.
Yeah, I mean, from a developer's perspective, I'm sure they would rather have their money straight away, right?
Same with everyone. One
But
check, please.
They will have done their due diligence, saying if we get paid over 7 years, we're still okay. That to me would be
Or they've done their due diligence and said, no one's going to take us up on this. And it's just
or maybe only 20% will have taken us up on it, and
Yeah.
we need that 20%. Yeah, look, it's true. It's just a little machination I had whilst I was driving along.
But you said in one of our other videos that you're seeing there's still quite a few launches going on at the moment, that off-plan is still...
The launches have slowed. Emaar at one stage were doing a launch a week. A couple of years ago, beginning of last year, they were doing a launch a week. You know,
Wow, that's crazy.
but Emaar are building cities. You know, they're building the Creek Harbour development, which is a huge development. Take a look at it. You're talking, 15 plus towers. It's a huge development, and they're launching it incrementally, bit by bit. So I don't see the launches are going to slow down anytime soon.
And, still seems there's a bit of appetite in Dubai.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen anything from Azizi for a while. We haven't seen anything from Damac for a while. Bits and bobs, but nothing huge. So I think the off plan has slowed down, but I don't think we're going to see the end of it.
But as we've said in other videos, if you see the bottom of the market coming, it's probably a good idea to buy off plan, because you buy off plan, you get it handover in 4 years, and hopefully you're buying here, and then the market comes up and you get delivered here.
Yeah.
Whereas buying off plan at the top of the market, you're going to get it delivered down here. You're going to be a little bit upset, and I wonder actually if that will affect market sentiment, because I know this happened in Abu Dhabi, where people have bought off plan in 2013, 2014, had it handed over worth less than what they paid for it, and I wonder if that will affect their view either of the developer or of off-plan generally, and say, listen, this is a crap investment.
It'd be a bit churlish for you to blame a developer on market.
It's not the developer's fault,
Yeah.
but people might see it that way. But the last time I bought off-plan off so-and-so, I got handed over and it was worth less than what I paid for it.
You can't be held responsible for the way people feel.
And another really interesting point, which I think we bypassed in Abu Dhabi, was if you buy off plan and your property is delivered at worth less than what you paid for it, and the bank comes in and says, well, actually, we're valuing this at less than what you paid for it, you might then have to add in a chunk of equity to be able to get your 75% financing.
Yeah, it depends
now,
on
I think
how
in
much
Abu
you paid
Dhabi
so far, right?
they did some kind of where the banks have said, okay, we'll value it at what you bought it at, because when you buy off plan, it should be at a discount, right? I mean, when you buy off plan, it shouldn't be market value. It should be, okay, if I got this today, it'd be worth $1 million, so I want a discount. I'm buying it now. Give me it for 900,000, because you're basically handing over cash up to 30%. Some of the payment plans are even bigger. Sometimes you pay a whole amount of cash. You don't get it for 4 years. So you lose the value of that cash.
We've seen a spike in Dubai property prices when they hand over, because they go from a off plan to a real hard asset.
Yeah, because it's de-risked basically. Once you buy it off plan, you've got the risk of non-delivery. But once it's handed over, that risk falls away. So
correct.
Property should, in a flat market, increase in value all the way up to handover.
I don't know whether we're seeing those spikes, because before it was anywhere between 10 and 20% of the value. So you'd see quite a lot of people coming in, scooping up, we'll call them deals from people who couldn't make their final payment. So you'd have an investor come in, scoop up, an undervalued asset. It's handed over 3 months further down the line, and they've made 10% by undervaluing it to the buyer, and then they've made 10 to 20% as soon as it hands over. So that was a whole sub investor class that we saw, but I don't think you'll be seeing them now, because I don't think you're going to get those 20% spike.
You see any secondary market and off-plan sales? People trying to sell their off-plan unit and people buying it?
Everywhere. It's a volatile world right now. So people's financial situations are changing. Some are obviously doing very well, some not so much. So we're seeing stuff that's being moved on still off-plan at negative premium, -10, -15% premiums.
And there are buyers for that, because we have that in Abu Dhabi, where people are approaching us all the time saying, I bought this off-plan, I want to sell it. But trying to find a buyer for something like that is incredibly difficult. People are happy to buy, on launch direct from the developer. Yeah. But actually in the secondary market, even if they're getting a discount, it's a real struggle to find people, willing to drop that 30% or whatever it is, that they're going to pay.
No, so I think it's a different thing here because of these handover, these payment plans. When they came in, so now you're getting people who have no real payment plan. They are on their, 40-60, so 40% before handover, 60% on handover. People are looking at that and going, well, I can get a better payment plan if I buy off plan. So those guys who've got no payment plans, they're struggling. But if you can come in and you can take someone's payment plan, take over someone's payment plan, then you have more of a chance of selling it. But then you've also got to factor in the fact, okay, how much has this guy paid already? If he's paid 50%, I've got to find 50% for this off-plan property.
Yeah.
And then I'll take over whatever of the payment plans he's got. Whereas they look at other things and they go, right, I can get in at 10,000 dirhams right now and find the rest over the next 4 years. It's more attractive. So depending on how deep they are in their payment plan is how easy you'll find to sell.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do all developers allow you to take over their payment plan? No, there's some in Abu Dhabi who don't.
I've not encountered a developer that doesn't. At the end of the day, they want to get paid, and if someone's selling,
Yeah, it's quite an incentive if you're a buyer to be able to transfer your payment plan to someone else if your circumstances change.
So I think you actually still do with EMI. You need to have paid a certain amount before you can sell it, and you've got to pay your Okud, which is your. I think
is it 30% by law?
I don't know, to be honest with you. It may have changed. I wouldn't want to go on record and say, but I know you have to have paid your Okud before you can sell it, which is your
4%.
4%. It's your registration fee, so it's your transfer fee of an off-plan property.
Yeah. Okay.
Or your registration fee. But if you haven't paid that, you can't sell.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you very much. You've been listening to, and if you're very unlucky watching, Two Fat Brokers, and today we were just talking about off-plan. So thanks for being with us, and see you next time.
Be good. Bye.
Bye.